r/ask Reddit. What evil prank have you pulled off? Two of my friends have never met each other. Before they spoke, I told both of them that the other is a bit deaf. They shouted at each other for a few minutes before they realized that I'm an a-hole. My mum's laptop wallpaper was a picture of her granddaughter. I copied the picture 100 times and made her wallpaper a slideshow of the same picture over and over again. So the file would change but nothing would change visibly on the monitor. The pictures would change every 10 seconds. On one of the images I painted a tiny little curly mustache on her. So randomly for 10 seconds my niece would have a mustache. My mum thought she was either losing her mind or had a computer virus, and every time the mustache popped up, it was gone by the time she tried to show anyone. I did something similar to a college friend. I replaced a single system sound file, the click for the mouse, with a 5-minute version. It started off identical, followed by 4 minutes and 50 seconds of silence, but at the end, it had me screaming. Now if another system sound would play, it stopped playing the previous sound. So he would use his computer, and then when he would walk away, it might scream 5 minutes later. One summer in college, I worked in the registrar's office, registering all the incoming freshmen. A prof who was a mentor to me was teaching freshman seminar and asked me to handpick a class for her. Straight A students, high sats, whatever. So I did. 15 students, all named Sarah. I lived in Korea for a bit. When my mom came to visit, I told my Korean girlfriend it was an American custom to greet older women by touching elbows. I told my mom the same story about Korean customs. It was a thing of beauty. They were not pleased. A friend kept trying to steal my sushi off my plate at a sushi restaurant. So while she wasn't looking, I stuffed it full of wasabi, put a bit of fish back on top to cover my tracks, and pretended to not be looking when she started reaching towards it. She tossed it into her mouth, started chewing down, and I just swung my head towards her to say, "You ducked up." 5 minutes of coughing, muffled screaming, and copious amounts of water later, she had learned her lesson. One night I replaced every framed object in my boss's office with a picture of me making a stern face. Posters, certificates, photos, etc. Took like 3 hours because he had like 30 framed things in his office. The next day I made sure I was out doing field work to make him sit with it most of the day. He had a lot of foot traffic to look at his office that day. I worked in an office that had 4 offices with shared partitions that had glass at the top. My neighbor wasn't the most observant person and kind of a dong. So I started printing random pictures like Nicolas Cage and setting them on my side of the office facing into his. He never noticed. It got to the point where everyone else in the office would check what photo I had set that week, but he never caught on. I remember it like it was yesterday. At summer camp, my cabin's leaders found a little snake that wasn't doing so well, so they decided to put it in an old terrarium in our cabin. A few of the guys were nervous about it, so the next day when the leaders decided the snake was well enough to release, I asked that they keep quiet about releasing it. When the other guys got back to the cabin and found no snake in the terrarium, chaos ensued. I thought my mom was cool with me having a pet snake. We went weeks without issue. So one night I'm letting it lay on my stomach while I watch TV, and at some point he decided to drop down and check out underneath the couch. His name was Breakfast. Kids are weird, and I say, oh man. Breakfast is under the couch. My mom was sitting maybe 15 feet away in our little office space, and she jumps up on the desk chair and starts screaming about the loose snake. Breakfast wasn't allowed out for TV time much after that. One that was played on me. I took my SATs, college entrance exams, for those outside the US on the 1st of April. Should have known, right? But apparently, I'm not that smart. That night I went out with a group of friends, and when I got home my mom met me with a serious look on her face. She told me that the testing committee had called, that there had been an error and all test papers from that day were lost. Everyone was being contacted to schedule a date to retake the exam. She totally sold it. Face, reactions, everything. I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and she let me believe it until lunchtime the next day. My mom is a diabolical person. Over a decade ago I worked in the warehouse of a guitar center. We dealt with inventory, shipping and receiving. We had a dumpster behind the store in a shared parking lot that people would leave random things in even though it was not a public dumpster. One day we found a broken beach chair in an open cardboard box. The box had a shipping label on it. It was left in such a way that it was easy to assume that the chair/box combo was left by the same person. We packed the beach chair in another box and shipped it back to the customer. I wish I was there to see the person's face when they received their trash back via UPS. Haha, I did something similar, but nowhere near this epic. There is a used bookstore that I go to sometimes. This bookstore sells used postcards. I bought a few that had been previously sent 20-30 years prior. I then slapped a fresh stamp on them and tossed them into the mailbox. I wish I could have seen the people's reaction when they showed up. Once I asked a friend for another friend's phone number. He gave me a teacher's number. I then went on to send multiple messages in a fake angry tone to my unsuspecting teacher. Duck that diabolical genius of a friend. I hope you didn't reveal your name in any of those texts. I used to work at a science tutoring center when I was in college and my gap year before professional school. One of the things we taught very often was anatomy, so naturally we acquired a few skeletons and various skulls with some variation in how they looked or were marked, etc. Well, I was closing one night, and I knew my co-worker was opening the next morning early, so before I locked up I assorted all of the skeletons and skulls in a welcome party near the front door. I had one immediately at the opening of the only door into the room with several backup skeletons and skulls just behind at a table together watching on. The best part was that you have to turn on the lights manually and that switch is immediately to the side of the door opening. So when she reached down to turn on the lights she had to come face to face with some lifeless skeleton skull in the middle of the shady opening. Needless to say she screamed, and it was loud enough to make our boss come to see if she was okay. Woke up to some colorful texts LMAO. Still proud of that one honestly. Working in a hot factory. Supervisor and job planner in this enclosed cubicle with a window AC unit in the middle of the shop aka nice 68 in there while we sweat our ass off in 95-110 heat. Kinda hot and pissy and always flies around. I kept grabbing the flies alive. Walking into the cubicle to ask a usually legit question or say I am just cooling off and opening my hand behind my back. I put 14 of those duckers in there in one shift. He never did catch on I was doing it and the planner was pissed swatting around, there were so many flies in there. Supervisor was cleaning out every crevice thinking some food is supporting life now somewhere. You were planting bugs in their office. Dude was harassing my ex because he used to have her cell phone number, was being a real ducking creep. Anyways, I created an email address, signed up to Kijiji and placed an ad offering an 80 inches 3D TV for free with some excuse about a bad breakup and not wanting her to get it. I asked people to only text or call. I then went to bed and forgot all about it until the next day at work I get a text from my ex asking if I had done something on Kijiji. The dude was begging her to take the ad down and apologizing. I checked the email and there were 5 pages of responses even though I had told them not to email but to call or text. Dude's phone must have been ringing constantly. I took the ad down and she never heard from him again. People in school used to always take my Gatorade. So I took an empty bottle, filled it with dyed salt water, and let them take my drink. Not gonna lie, it was hilarious watching one person to spit salt water in the middle of class only for their unbelieving friend to do the same. They just take your Gatorade? I got pranked. Does that count? Was at a house party at my then girlfriend's place. She knew me really well and knew that I've got a fairly competitive spirit. The place is really dark. She turns to me at the dim light and says, "My name. I bet you can't fit an orange in your mouth and eat it all in one bite." Wasn't about to say no to a challenge so I took her up on it. Only it wasn't an orange that she peeled but a lemon. Joke's on you. I love sour things. Nah, but really warheads aren't as sour as they used to be. Picked out every last marshmallow from my sister's box of Lucky Charms. Then took a photo of me eating a bowl of Just Charms. Printed it and put in the bottom of the bag. I then sealed the bag back up, hot glued the box and back in the pantry it went. This isn't a prank, this is the work of Satan. In high school I went into the boys' bathroom and replaced all the soap in the dispensers with pancake syrup. Adult version is to take a bottle of hand sanitizer, clean it out, fill with KY jelly, leave in a public location. Not a prank I pulled off, but one I was victim to. My manager had left me in charge of the store when I was 16. Not legal, but that's a whole other mess. For a whole weekend. Saturday went well and I was happy with how I went. Although my paranoid brain is always concerned about whether or not doors are actually locked. I'm the same with my house. But the store was worse. So I make my dad drive down to the store to double check that everything is okay. 15 minutes later I get a phone call from him saying, "Manager, and the police are here because the door was unlocked and people were inside." Cue to me on the floor in tears hyperventilating, while my dad is telling my mum, who had since picked up the phone, that he was only kidding and that everything was fine. Gradually over the course of 2 weeks moved my co-worker's monitors closer to the front edge of the desk, like 1/4 per move, until they were so close the keyboard barely fit. "Stupid small desk," she grumbled. Near the end, I then moved them back, just as slowly, over a few weeks. She never caught on. Flipped the lights on and off while my sister and friends played with a Ouija board. Hasn't quite been the same since. Welded a co-worker's boot to the floor. He had worn out the toe caps on his steel-toed boots while he was making a weld kneeling inside a large piece of equipment on steel. I put a small tack weld on his boot so he had trouble breaking it loose and getting up. Osha would like to know your location. Bought a new TV after saving up for a couple months. Next day I played a video on the TV to make it look like it fell and was broken cracked, and my housemates all individually fell for it, delighted with myself. I put hot sauce on my little brother's toothpaste one morning when we were kids. He apparently thought he was being poisoned. Kept both regular and Honey Nut Cheerios at the house because my mom and my dad each ate one type and hated the other. Unless you look close, they appear the same, so one day I switched the boxes. The looks were priceless. My brother used my Netflix and I made his profile a kids account. He likes kids shows and movies, so he went 2 weeks without noticing. I waited a month or so and randomly changed it again. My timing was impeccable. He was watching The Punisher. I worked at a fast food where the boss was too cheap to get AC installed. In the super hot summer days we would all sweat so much that we could wring sweat out of our uniforms. There was this boy who I had a love-hate relationship with. We would always prank each other, but mine were always tame. Until one day, he left his drink in the back while he was flipping burgers. I grabbed a vinegar packet, cut open a corner and put a straw directly into it and exchanged it with the straw from his drink. Moments later, I was in the front of the store and I heard him spit and scream my name while calling me a beach. He still high-fived me. My co-workers in the Chicago office asked me to bring back a phone book and the hotel stationery from my business trip to Kansas City. They were preparing for another co-worker's bachelor party for the night before the wedding. The groom was known for drinking to an extent that was considered legendary. After a night of drinking, he woke up on the morning of his wedding in a hotel room. He checked the nightstand and found the Kansas City phone book. The desk was stocked with KC stationery. His friends had clued the front desk staff in on what was happening and convinced them to answer his room phone "Good morning and welcome to the Kansas City Holiday Inn." It was 5 hours till the wedding, and he was actually only a couple miles from the venue. But the freakout was epic. Out with my flatmates at the pub. One had brought a bunch of mates with him and they were being quite loud, whereas I prefer a quieter meeting. Still, I was a bit tipsy too. So, I filled one of the spare shot glasses on the table with vinegar. I assumed when I passed it to him he'd smell it and realize, nope, he downed that shit, then coughed and spat it back into the glass. I was 9. My dad just had hernia surgery the day prior and was recuperating on the couch. Before I left for school, I put the Martha Stewart channel on and left the remote just beyond his reach. He spent 8 hours learning how to arrange pillows on a bed. He exacted his revenge 15 years later. I just had my emergency C-section and he put Frozen on and left it on a loop while the entire family left for the mall and left the remote just out of my reach. Revenge is indeed a dish best served cold. At my high school senior class picnic way back in the late 80s, I spread a rumor that the brownies I brought were pot brownies. Half a dozen kids went to the nurse because they were so stoned. I've posted this before, but I made a friend believe she was being followed by a garden gnome. For years, many of her friends are involved plus other helpers. She shows up at a B&B in Scotland that we'd recommended, and there was a gnome in the garden. And it looked exactly like the gnome that had briefly turned up in her yard. Then she saw it on her way to work. Then in Provence and Germany. It really did look like the same gnome. It was. I have an extra mouse in my desk drawer at work. I have the USB plugged into the docking station of the obnoxious guy a couple cubes away. On days he is particularly obnoxious, I will take out the extra mouse and move it around every few minutes. He has never realized because it's plugged into the docking station and not his laptop. He has even had the laptop replaced. Never noticed. It brings me to tears, silently laughing sometimes. I have to be careful not to overdo it. My mom took my computer away once, and I was really mad about it. So I disconnected the power button from the motherboard on her computer so she couldn't turn it on. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.